The sound of bone cracking echoed through the marble hallway like a gunshot. 9-year-old Bella Morrison's scream pierced the air as her thin arm bent at an impossible angle, the yellow plastic broom handle still vibrating in Karen Whitfield's manicured hands. The security camera in the corner of Grandview Tower's lobby captured every horrifying second in crystal-clear high definition. "You little freak, I told you to move!" Karen's voice shrieked across the elegant space. Her face twisted with rage as she raised the broom again. Bella collapsed against the wall, her cerebral palsy making her movements jerky and uncontrolled as she tried to shield herself with her one good arm. The morning had started so peacefully. Bella had been helping her mother, Dr. Sarah Morrison, collect their mail from the building's ornate mailbox wall. The little girl moved slowly, her specialized leg braces clicking softly against the polished floor as she concentrated on each careful step. Her bright pink backpack, decorated with butterfly stickers, bounced gently as she walked. "Mom, I can get the letters today. I'm strong enough," Bella had said, her words slightly slurred but filled with determination. Her dark eyes sparkled with the kind of fierce independence that had carried her through countless physical therapy sessions and medical appointments. Sarah watched her daughter with a mixture of pride and protective anxiety. At 38, Dr. Sarah Morrison had built a reputation as one of the most formidable civil rights attorneys in the state. She had faced down corrupt politicians, racist judges, and corporate bullies without flinching. But watching her daughter navigate a world that wasn't built for children with disabilities made her heart race every single day. "Take your time, sweetheart. There's no rush," Sarah said softly, though she kept glancing at her watch. She had a deposition in 2 hours for a disability discrimination case that had consumed her life for the past 6 months. Grandview Towers was supposed to be different. The luxury high-rise advertised itself as inclusive living for modern families, with wide hallways, accessible entrances, and a community that celebrated diversity. Sarah had paid premium prices for their corner unit, specifically because the building's marketing materials promised a welcoming environment for families with special needs. The reality had been far different. From the moment they moved in 6 months ago, Karen Whitfield had made their lives miserable. As the self-appointed HOA president of their floor, Karen treated the building like her personal kingdom. Her platinum blonde hair was always perfectly styled, her designer clothes immaculate, and her sense of entitlement absolutely unshakable. "That child doesn't belong here," Karen had announced at the first residence meeting Sarah attended. "This is a premium building. We have standards." The comments had escalated from there. Noise complaints about Bella's physical therapy equipment, accusations that her medical deliveries were cluttering the lobby, demands that Sarah control her child's disturbing behavior when Bella's cerebral palsy caused muscle spasms in public spaces. Sarah had documented everything, her legal training making her meticulous about keeping records. But she had hoped the situation would improve. She believed in the power of education, in the possibility that people could change when they understood the challenges facing families like theirs. She had been wrong. This morning, as Bella slowly made her way toward the mailboxes, Karen had emerged from the elevator like a blonde hurricane. She wore a white tennis outfit that probably cost more than most families spent on groceries in a month, and her face was already flushed with anger. "Not again. You're blocking the entire hallway," Karen had shouted, though the hallway was easily 12 feet wide and completely empty except for the 3 of them. "We're just getting our mail," Sarah had replied calmly, though her jaw tightened. "We'll be done in just a moment." A moment she takes forever to do anything. Some of us have important places to be. Karen's voice had risen to a shriek that echoed off the marble walls. Bella had frozen, her small body trembling. The muscle tension that came with her cerebral palsy always got worse when she was stressed. and Karen's shouting was making her movements even more difficult to control. "Please don't yell at my daughter," Sarah had said, stepping protectively in front of Bella. "She's doing her best. Her best isn't good enough. This is a respectable building, not some charity ward." Karen's eyes had blazed with a hatred that seemed to radiate from her very core. That's when she had spotted the maintenance broom leaning against the wall near the elevator bank. In one fluid motion, she had grabbed it and advanced on Bella like a predator stalking wounded prey. "Move now!" Karen had screamed, using the broom handle to shove Bella hard in the shoulder. The little girl had stumbled, her leg braces making it impossible to catch herself properly. As she fell, her left arm had twisted behind her back, and Karen, lost in her rage, had brought the broom down like a club. The crack of breaking bone would haunt Sarah's nightmares for years to come. "Bella!" Sarah's scream echoed through the lobby as she dropped to her knees beside her daughter. The little girl's arm hung at a sickening angle, and her face had gone ghost white with shock and pain. "Now look what she's done. She's bleeding all over my floor," Karen shrieked, seemingly oblivious to the magnitude of what she had just done. A thin trickle of blood was indeed seeping from where the broom handle had scraped Bella's arm. "You broke her arm." Sarah's voice was barely human, a mixture of maternal fury and professional outrage that made the air itself seem to vibrate with danger. "She shouldn't have been in my way. This is what happens when you don't teach freaks proper manners." Karen raised the broom again, but this time she found her wrist caught in an iron grip. Marcus Chen, a software engineer from the 8th floor, had been coming down to get his morning coffee when he heard the commotion. At 6'2", and with the build of someone who still played college rugby on weekends, he had no trouble restraining Karen's broom-wielding arm. "That's enough." His voice carried the kind of authority that made Karen step back instinctively. "I'm calling 911. You can't call the police on me. I'm the HOA president. This is my building." Karen's voice had reached a pitch that made several dogs in nearby apartments start barking. "Actually, you're not," came a calm voice from behind them. Eleanor Washington, the building's actual property manager, had emerged from her office with a security guard in tow. At 73, Eleanor had seen every kind of tenant drama imaginable, but the scene before her made her stomach turn. "Mrs. Whitfield, you are not the HOA president. You've never been elected to any position in this building. You've been told this multiple times." Eleanor's voice was steady, but her dark eyes blazed with fury as she took in Bella's broken arm and tear-streaked face. Marcus was already on his phone with emergency services. "We need an ambulance at Grandview Towers, 1247 Elm Street. A 9-year-old girl has what appears to be a broken arm. The injury was caused by an adult resident attacking her with a broom." The word "attacking" seemed to snap Karen out of her rage-induced haze. For the first time, she seemed to realize that other people were watching, that there might be consequences for her actions. "Attack! I didn't attack anyone. I was just trying to clear the hallway. She was blocking traffic." Karen's voice had lost some of its shrillness, replaced by a note of panic. "Traffic." Marcus looked around the empty hallway with obvious disbelief. "Lady, there's literally nobody else here." More residents had begun to gather. Mrs. Rodriguez, from 4B, still in her nurse's scrubs from the night shift, immediately knelt beside Bella to assess her injuries. Dr. Patel from the penthouse, a pediatrician who had always been kind to Bella, pushed through the crowd with his medical bag. "Let me take a look, sweetheart." "Doctor," Patel said gently to Bella, his voice carrying the calm professionalism that had comforted thousands of frightened children over his 30-year career. "I'm going to be very careful." "Okay." Bella nodded weakly, tears streaming down her face as she tried to be brave. "It hurts really bad. Dr. Patel." I can't move my fingers. I know it does. Brave girl. The ambulance is coming, and they're going to take very good care of you. Doctor. Patel's examination confirmed what everyone could see. The arm was definitely broken, probably in multiple places. This is ridiculous. You're all acting like I committed some kind of crime. Karen's voice had become shrill again, as she realized that public opinion was turning decisively against her. That child has been a menace since the day she moved in. Always making noise. Always getting in everyone's way. She's 9 years old and disabled. You absolute monster. Mrs. Rodriguez said, her voice shaking with rage. What kind of person attacks a child? I didn't attack her. I was just trying to get her to move. Karen was backing toward the elevator, but Marcus and the security guard had positioned themselves to block her escape route. With a broom! By breaking her arm, Eleanor's voice cut through Karen's protests like a knife. Mrs. Whitfield, I've been managing this building for 15 years. I've dealt with difficult residents before, but I have never, in my entire career, seen anything as despicable as what you just did. The sound of sirens was growing louder, echoing off the glass and steel canyons of downtown. Within minutes, the lobby was filled with paramedics, police officers, and the controlled chaos of an emergency response. Ma'am, I'm Officer Rodriguez with the Metro Police. Can you tell me what happened here? The lead officer, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and graying hair, knelt beside Sarah as the paramedics carefully stabilized Bella's arm. Sarah's legal training kicked in even through her maternal panic. She gave a clear, concise account of events, identifying witnesses and pointing out the security camera that had captured everything. That woman, Karen Whitfield, has been harassing my daughter for months because of her disability. Today, she attacked Bella with a broom and broke her arm. Everything is on camera. Officer Rodriguez's expression hardened as she looked over at Karen, who was now frantically trying to explain herself to another officer. Officer, this is all a huge misunderstanding. Karen's voice had taken on a pleading tone. I'm a respected member of this community. I volunteer at the country club. I would never hurt a child. Ma'am, we have multiple witnesses who saw you strike the child with a broom. Officer Johnson replied dryly. And according to the building manager, everything was caught on security camera. The camera will show that I was defending myself. That child is dangerous. She attacks people. Karen's desperation was making her say increasingly outrageous things. She's 9 years old and weighs maybe 60 pounds, Marcus said incredulously. How exactly is she dangerous? She has that disease, that palsy thing. People like that can be violent. Karen's words sent a shocked silence through the crowd. Dr. Patel stood up slowly, his usually gentle demeanor replaced by cold fury. Mrs. Whitfield, cerebral palsy is a movement disorder. It affects muscle control and posture. It doesn't make children violent. What you just said reveals a level of ignorance and prejudice that is genuinely disturbing. The paramedics were ready to transport Bella to Children's Hospital. As they carefully loaded her onto the stretcher, she looked up at her mother with eyes full of pain and confusion. Mom, why did she hurt me? I was just trying to get our mail. The innocence in her voice broke something inside every adult who heard it. Sarah climbed into the ambulance beside her daughter, her hand gently stroking Bella's dark hair. I don't know, baby, but I promise you, she's never going to hurt you again. As the ambulance pulled away, its red and blue lights painting the lobby in urgent colors, Officer Rodriguez turned her attention back to Karen. Ma'am, you're under arrest for assault on a minor and assault with a weapon. You have the right to remain silent. This is insane. I want to call my lawyer. Do you know who I am? My husband is vice president of Whitfield Industries. Karen's voice echoed through the lobby as the handcuffs clicked into place. "That's nice for him," Officer Rodriguez replied calmly. "But right now, you're just someone who broke a disabled child's arm with a broom." At Children's Hospital, the emergency room moved with practiced efficiency. X-rays confirmed what Dr. Patel had suspected. Bella's radius and ulna were both fractured, requiring immediate surgery to set the bones properly. The good news is that children heal remarkably well. Dr. Martinez, the orthopedic surgeon, explained to Sarah as they prepped Bella for surgery. "The breaks are clean, and with proper treatment, she should have full function of her arm." "How long will she be in a cast?" Sarah asked, trying to calculate how this would affect Bella's physical therapy schedule. 6 to 8 weeks, possibly longer given her underlying condition. The cerebral palsy might slow the healing process slightly, and we'll need to be extra careful about physical therapy to prevent muscle atrophy. Sarah nodded, her mind already racing through the implications. 6 weeks without proper physical therapy could set Bella back months in her development. The rage she felt toward Karen Whitfield burned like acid in her chest. While Bella was in surgery, Sarah made a phone call that would change everything. Her assistant, Jennifer, answered on the first ring. "Dr. Morrison, I heard about Bella on the news. How is she?" "She's in surgery now. Jennifer, I need you to clear my calendar for the next month, and I need you to pull every file we have on disability, discrimination cases, assault cases, and civil rights violations. I'm about to take on a case that's going to consume my life." "Your own case?" Jennifer's voice was carefully neutral, but Sarah could hear the suppressed excitement. "My daughter's case. Someone just made the mistake of their lifetime." What Karen Whitfield didn't know, what none of the residents of Grandview Towers realized, was exactly who Sarah Morrison was in the legal world. She had successfully sued 3 major corporations for disability discrimination in the past 5 years. She had gotten a corrupt judge removed from the bench for bias against plaintiffs with disabilities. She had rewritten accessibility laws in 2 states and had argued cases before the Supreme Court. Karen Whitfield had just declared war on one of the most dangerous civil rights attorneys in the country, and she had done it by attacking that attorney's disabled child. The story broke on the evening news before Karen had even been released on bail. Someone had leaked the security camera footage, and the video of a perfectly groomed woman in tennis whites beating a disabled child with a broom played on every local channel and spread across social media like wildfire. Tonight at 11, exclusive footage of a shocking attack in an upscale downtown building. Warning: viewers may find this content disturbing. By midnight, the hashtag #CheerJusticeForBella was trending nationally. The video had been shared hundreds of thousands of times, each share accompanied by comments of outrage and disgust. "This woman is a monster. How do you attack a child, a disabled child? I hope they throw the book at her." Karen's phone began ringing at 5 in the morning. Reporters, neighbors, strangers who had somehow gotten her number. Her doorbell rang constantly as news crews gathered outside her luxury home in the suburbs. "Richard, make them go away," she shrieked at her husband, a pale man in expensive pajamas who looked like he wished he could disappear entirely. "Karen, what did you do?" Richard Whitfield had built his family's business by avoiding scandal and maintaining a spotless reputation. The video of his wife attacking a disabled child was going to destroy everything he had worked for. "I didn't do anything. That child has been terrorizing our building for months. I was just trying to maintain order." Even now, Karen seemed incapable of understanding the magnitude of her actions. By the 3rd day, Grandview Towers was under siege. Protesters gathered outside with signs reading, "Justice for Bella," and "No safe space for child abusers." The building's management had to hire security guards just to get residents in and out safely. "This is affecting our property values," complained Mr. Davidson from the 12th floor during an emergency HOA meeting. "We need to distance ourselves from this situation immediately." Eleanor Washington stood at the front of the room, her face grim. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've been in contact with our legal counsel. Mrs. Whitfield's actions have exposed this building to significant liability. The board has voted unanimously to begin eviction proceedings. You can't evict me. I've lived here for 3 years. I have rights." Karen had snuck into the meeting through a service entrance, her usually perfect appearance disheveled from days of hiding from reporters. "Mrs. Whitfield, you assaulted a child in our lobby. You broke that child's arm with a weapon. You have exposed this building to lawsuits that could bankrupt us all." Eleanor's voice was ice cold. "Your lease agreement clearly states that criminal activity is grounds for immediate eviction." "Criminal activity? I haven't been convicted of anything." Karen's lawyer, a nervous-looking man in an ill-fitting suit, had been trying to keep her quiet throughout the meeting. "Actually, Mrs. Whitfield, you've been charged with aggravated assault on a minor, assault with a weapon, and child endangerment. The video evidence is overwhelming." Marcus Chen had done his research. "And I suspect that's just the beginning." He was right. Sarah Morrison had spent the week while her daughter recovered from surgery, building a case that would destroy Karen Whitfield's life piece by piece. The civil lawsuit was filed exactly 1 week after the attack. 47 pages of legal documentation that read like a declaration of war. Morrison v. Whitfield accused Karen of assault, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, disability, discrimination, violation of civil rights, and a dozen other charges that carried potential damages in the millions. But Sarah wasn't finished. She had also filed complaints with the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, the state's Human Rights Commission, and had petitioned for federal hate crime charges based on Karen's attack being motivated by disability bias. Dr. Morrison is not just seeking monetary damages, Sarah's co-counsel explained to reporters gathered outside the courthouse. She wants to ensure that what happened to Bella never happens to any other disabled child. The deposition was scheduled for the following Monday. Karen arrived with her legal team, 3 lawyers from one of the city's most expensive firms. Sarah came alone. "Mrs. Whitfield, please state your full name for the record." "Karen Elizabeth Whitfield." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "And do you recall the events of October 15th at Grandview Towers?" I was trying to get to my tennis lesson. The child was blocking the hallway." "The child has a name. Bella Morrison. She's 9 years old and has cerebral palsy." "Were you aware of her disability?" "Everyone in the building knew about her condition." "Her condition. And how did you feel about living in the same building as a child with cerebral palsy?" Karen's lawyer leaned over to whisper in her ear. But Sarah had already seen the answer in Karen's eyes. "Mrs. Whitfield, I have here transcripts of recordings from residents' meetings, where you referred to my daughter as that freak, the retarded kid, and a menace who doesn't belong in a respectable building. Do you recall making those statements?" Those were taken out of context." "What context makes it appropriate to call a disabled child a freak?" Sarah's voice was calm, professional, deadly. The deposition continued for 6 hours. By the end, Karen was in tears. Her lawyers were requesting breaks every few minutes, and Sarah had methodically documented a pattern of harassment and discrimination that had been building for months. But the real bombshell came during the discovery phase. Sarah's investigators had done their homework on Karen Whitfield, and what they found was devastating. Karen wasn't just a privileged woman with bigoted views. She was a fraud who had been living far beyond her means for years. The luxury clothes, the expensive cars, the country club memberships. It was all financed by credit cards and loans that she was struggling to pay. More damaging still, her husband's business was already under investigation by the IRS for tax evasion. The negative publicity from Karen's attack on Bella had caused 3 major clients to cancel their contracts, pushing Whitfield Industries toward bankruptcy. Your Honor, the defendant's financial situation is directly relevant to our case, Sarah argued before Judge Patricia Coleman. Mrs. Whitfield's attack on my daughter was motivated by her belief that disabled children don't belong in upscale buildings. Her entire identity is built around maintaining an image of wealth and superiority that she can't actually afford. Judge Coleman, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who had presided over civil rights cases for 20 years, was not impressed by Karen's legal team's objections. The court finds that the defendant's financial status and social motivations are relevant to establishing pattern of discriminatory behavior. The plaintiff's discovery requests are granted. 3 weeks later, the criminal trial began. The prosecutor, District Attorney Maria Santos, had rarely seen a case with such overwhelming evidence. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you're going to see a video today that will shock and appall you. You're going to watch a grown woman attack a disabled child with a weapon. And you're going to hear that woman try to justify her actions by claiming that disabled children don't deserve the same rights as everyone else. The security camera footage played on the courtroom's large screen. Even though everyone had seen it dozens of times by now, the sound of Bella's scream and the crack of her breaking arm made several jurors gasp audibly. Bella testified via video link from Sarah's office, her small arm still in a bright purple cast, decorated with more butterfly stickers. Her testimony was devastating in its innocence. I was just trying to help Mommy get our mail. I walk slow because of my legs. But I wasn't blocking anybody. The hallway is really big. Mrs. Karen started yelling at me, and then she hit me with the stick. It hurt really bad. Bella, had Mrs. Karen ever been mean to you before? D.A. Santos asked gently. She always says mean things about my legs. She calls me names. Mommy told me to just ignore her. But she's really scary. Karen's defense strategy was as tone-deaf as expected. Her lawyer tried to argue that she had been defending herself from what she perceived as a threat. My client felt threatened by the child's erratic movements. People with cerebral palsy can be unpredictable, and Mrs. Whitfield feared for her safety. Dr. Patel's expert testimony demolished that argument in minutes. Cerebral palsy affects movement and posture. It doesn't make children aggressive or dangerous. Bella Morrison weighs 58 pounds and moves with the assistance of leg braces. The suggestion that she posed any physical threat to a healthy adult is medically absurd. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Karen Whitfield was found guilty on all charges: aggravated assault on a minor, assault with a weapon, child endangerment, and hate crime enhancements based on disability bias. Judge Rodriguez, who had presided over the criminal trial, did not mince words during sentencing. Mrs. Whitfield, in 30 years on this bench, I have rarely seen a case that so clearly illustrates the devastating impact of prejudice and hatred. You attacked a disabled child because you believed she didn't deserve to exist in your space. Your actions were cowardly, cruel, and completely inexcusable. I sentence you to 3 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for 18 months. You will also serve 5 years of probation upon release, during which you will complete diversity training and community service specifically focused on disability advocacy. But the criminal conviction was just the beginning of Karen's legal nightmare. The civil trial, held 6 months later, was where Sarah Morrison truly demonstrated why she was considered one of the most formidable attorneys in the state. Your Honor, this case is about more than just monetary damages. It's about sending a clear message that attacks on disabled children will have devastating consequences for the perpetrators. Sarah had documented every aspect of how the attack had affected Bella's life. The physical therapy setbacks, the nightmares, the anxiety about going out in public, the additional medical expenses, and the long-term psychological trauma. Bella was making excellent progress in her physical development before Mrs. Whitfield's attack. The broken arm has set her back months in her therapy. She now requires additional psychological counseling to deal with the trauma of being attacked for her disability. The damages Sarah was seeking were staggering: $2 million for pain and suffering, $1 million for medical expenses and lost opportunities, $3 million in punitive damages, and an additional $5 million for the federal civil rights violations. Karen's legal team tried desperately to negotiate a settlement, but Sarah was uninterested in compromise. Mrs. Whitfield had the opportunity to apologize, to show remorse, to acknowledge the harm she caused to my daughter. Instead, she has spent the past year trying to justify her actions and minimize Bella's injuries. There will be no settlement. The civil jury awarded Sarah everything she had asked for, and more. $11 million in total damages, one of the largest civil rights judgments in the state's history. But money wasn't the only thing Karen lost. The judgment gave Sarah the right to seize all of Karen's assets: her house, her cars, her jewelry, her bank accounts, everything. The day of the asset seizure was captured by news cameras as federal marshals carried Karen's belongings out of her mansion: designer clothes, expensive artwork, the BMW convertible she had been driving to her tennis lesson the morning she attacked Bella. All of it was loaded into trucks bound for auction. "This is my life, you can't take everything," Karen screamed at the marshals. But her protests fell on deaf ears. "Ma'am, you owe $11 million plus interest and court costs. We're authorized to seize assets up to that amount," the lead marshal explained patiently. Karen's husband had filed for divorce during the criminal trial, taking their remaining assets with him and leaving her with nothing but legal bills and a criminal record. The community impact was equally devastating for Karen. The country club had revoked her membership. The charity organizations she had been involved with had publicly distanced themselves from her. Former friends crossed the street to avoid her, unwilling to be associated with someone who had attacked a disabled child. Meanwhile, the story had inspired positive changes throughout the city. 3 other buildings in the downtown area had been investigated for disability discrimination. New city ordinances required mandatory accessibility training for all HOA board members. The state legislature passed Bella's Law, which increased penalties for crimes motivated by disability bias. Sarah used a portion of the judgment money to establish the Bella Morrison Foundation, dedicated to providing legal assistance to families facing disability discrimination. The foundation's first case was helping a family whose autistic son had been banned from a public swimming pool. "Every child deserves to feel safe in their community," Sarah said at the foundation's launch event. "What happened to Bella was horrific, but if we can prevent it from happening to other children, then something good will have come from our pain." Bella, now 10 years old and fully recovered from her injuries, cut the ribbon at the foundation's new office. Her purple cast had been replaced by a small scar that she wore like a badge of courage. "I want to help other kids like me," she said into the microphone, her voice stronger and more confident than it had been a year ago. "Nobody should be hurt just because they're different." The crowd of supporters, including many of her neighbors from Grandview Towers, erupted in applause. Marcus Chen was there with his wife and children. Dr. Patel had closed his practice early to attend. Eleanor Washington stood in the front row, wiping tears from her eyes. Even some of the protesters who had gathered outside their building in those first traumatic days had come to celebrate Bella's recovery and the positive changes that had emerged from the tragedy. Karen Whitfield was notably absent. She was serving her sentence in the state women's correctional facility, having been denied early release due to her continued refusal to accept responsibility for her actions. The defendant has shown no genuine remorse for her crimes. The parole board had noted in their decision. She continues to blame the victim and minimize the severity of her actions. She is not yet ready for release into the community. 6 months later, Sarah received a letter that she had been both expecting and dreading. It was from Karen, written on prison stationery and handwriting that was barely legible. Dr. Morrison, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I've had a lot of time to think about what I did, and I finally understand how wrong I was. I can't undo the harm I caused to Bella, but I want you to know that I'm truly sorry. I was angry and scared, and I took it out on a little girl who didn't deserve it. I hope someday you can forgive me, though I know I don't deserve it. Karen. Sarah read the letter twice, then showed it to Bella, who was now old enough to understand the complexity of forgiveness and justice. What do you think, sweetheart? Do you think she really means it? Bella considered the question with the seriousness of someone who had learned hard lessons about human nature at a very young age. Maybe she does mean it now, but it took her a really long time to say sorry. And saying sorry doesn't make my arm stop remembering how much it hurt. You're absolutely right. What do you think we should do about the letter? I think we should keep helping other kids, so this doesn't happen to them. That's more important than whether she's sorry now. Sarah smiled and hugged her daughter, marveling at the wisdom that had emerged from such a traumatic experience. Bella was right, as she often was. The foundation they had built was helping dozens of families navigate discrimination and disability bias. That was the real victory. The letter from Karen went unanswered, but Sarah kept it in her office files as a reminder of how far they had all come from that terrible morning in the lobby of Grandview Towers. 2 years after the attack, Bella Morrison was thriving. Her physical therapy had progressed beyond where she had been before her arm was broken. She was excelling in school, had made friends with several other children with disabilities through the foundation support groups, and had become a confident public speaker who advocated for inclusion and accessibility. Sometimes bad things happen that change everything, she said during a presentation to a group of teachers about disability awareness. But you get to choose whether you let the bad thing make you smaller or whether you use it to help other people. The audience of educators was silent as this 12-year-old girl with leg braces and butterfly stickers on her notebook shared wisdom that many adults never learn. I chose to help other people, and that made the bad thing hurt less. Karen Whitfield was released from prison after serving 2.5 years of her sentence. She moved to a different state, where she worked part-time at a retail job and lived in a small apartment. The $11 million judgment followed her everywhere, making it impossible to rebuild the life of luxury she had once known. She never again lived in a building with disabled residents, but not by choice. No reputable property management company would rent to her once they discovered her criminal history of attacking a disabled child. The security camera footage of her attack on Bella Morrison had become a training video used in diversity and inclusion workshops across the country. Her name had become synonymous with the worst kind of disability discrimination, a cautionary tale of how prejudice and hatred can destroy lives. Meanwhile, Grandview Towers had transformed itself into a model of inclusive community living. The building now featured accessible design elements throughout, offered disability awareness training to all residents, and had established a fund to support families with disabled children. Eleanor Washington, now in her late 70s, often spoke about how the tragedy had ultimately brought the community together in ways she had never imagined possible. We learned that a community is only as strong as how it treats its most vulnerable members, she said during the building's 5th annual Accessibility Awareness event. Bella Morrison taught us all what courage looks like. Bella, now a confident teenager with dreams of becoming a disability rights lawyer like her mother, smiled as she listened to Mrs. Washington's speech. The same lobby where she had been attacked was now decorated with artwork created by children with disabilities, their colorful paintings celebrating diversity and inclusion. "It's funny," she said to her mother as they walked through the lobby after the event. "This place used to be scary because of one mean person. Now it's one of my favorite places because of all the kind people." Sarah looked around the lobby where her daughter had suffered such trauma, now transformed into a space that celebrated everything Karen Whitfield had tried to destroy. The marble floors that had once echoed with screams now resonated with laughter and conversation from a community that had learned to embrace difference rather than fear it. "Sometimes the best way to defeat hatred is to replace it with something better," Sarah said, watching as a group of children, some with disabilities and some without, played together near the butterfly garden that had been installed in Bella's honor. The story of Bella Morrison and Karen Whitfield had become more than just a news headline or a legal case. It had become a reminder that individual choices, both good and evil, can ripple outward to transform entire communities. Karen's choice to attack a disabled child had destroyed her own life and traumatized a family. But it had also inspired a movement toward inclusion and understanding that would protect countless other children for generations to come. Bella's choice to transform her trauma into advocacy had created a foundation that would help hundreds of families facing discrimination. Her courage in the face of hatred had shown an entire community what it meant to turn pain into purpose. And in the end, that was the most important victory of all. Not the money Karen lost or the prison sentence she served, but the positive change that emerged from a moment of terrible violence. A disabled child's broken arm had been the catalyst for breaking down barriers and building bridges in ways that no one could have imagined. As Bella often said in her speeches, "The person who hurt me thought I didn't belong in her world. But now, because of what happened, the world is a little bit better for kids like me." That's how you win against hate. You make the world more loving than it was before. The last sound in the lobby of Grandview Towers that evening was not the crack of breaking bone or the scream of a terrified child. It was the gentle laughter of Bella Morrison as she walked hand in hand with her mother toward their home, surrounded by neighbors who had learned that a community's strength comes not from excluding those who are different, but from embracing them. Justice had been served, not just in the courtroom, but in the transformation of hearts and minds that would protect vulnerable children long after the headlines faded and the legal documents were filed away. In the end, love had conquered hate, not through revenge, but through the slow, patient work of building a better world for everyone.